Charles II of Spain. Charles II is the clearest example of a royal bloodline collapsing inside a living body. By the time Charles was born, the Spanish Habsburgs had spent generations marrying close relatives. Cousins married cousins, uncles married nieces. That history matters because Charles did not simply look unusual, he looked medically overwhelmed from the start. He inherited the famous Habsburg jaw and a protruding lower lip with a tongue so large that speaking clearly could be difficult. Eating was difficult too. Chewing was hard, and his body often seemed thin, weak, and badly nourished. Sources describe repeated illness, constant exhaustion, and a ruler who seemed older than his years. He was infertile, and that turned a medical problem into a dynastic disaster. People around him did not understand genetics, so they blamed curses and witchcraft. But the simpler explanation is more disturbing. Generations of inbreeding had narrowed the bloodline until the damage became visible. Charles died in 1700, aged only 38, childless and physically broken. With him, the Spanish Habsburg line ended. His body became the final warning of what closed royal blood could do. Tutankhamun. Behind the golden mask was a teenage king with a much more fragile body. He came from the Amarna royal family, where close kin marriage shaped the dynasty. That matters because Tutankhamun was not simply a boy king who died early. He seems to have lived with real physical problems. Studies of his remains have been linked to a damaged foot and trouble walking. That matches one striking detail from his tomb: dozens of walking sticks. Far too many for a perfectly healthy teenager. Some researchers also point to bone weakness and a generally delicate constitution. Illness may have made things worse. Malaria is one of the most discussed possibilities in the debate around his death. Then came the leg fracture near the end of his life, the kind of injury that could become deadly if the body was already fragile. The exact cause of death is still debated, but Tutankhamun died around 19. The overall picture is not a golden god, but a vulnerable, adolescent ruler. His mask survived almost perfectly. The body beneath it told a much weaker and sadder story. Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra belongs here because her dynasty made close family marriage normal for centuries. The Ptolemies repeatedly married brothers to sisters and close kin to close kin. That makes Cleopatra a useful contrast to Charles or Tutankhamun. In her own case, we do not have strong evidence for spectacular physical collapse. She does not seem to have been visibly deformed or medically broken. The ancient image is almost the opposite: intelligent, educated, and politically formidable. That matters because not every closed bloodline breaks in the same visible way. So Cleopatra is not the sickest figure in this video. She is the most famous face of one of history's strangest dynastic systems. Her end came not through a clear inherited disease, but through suicide after defeat, traditionally linked to poison or the ASP story. Cleopatra shows the dynasty more than the diagnosis, but she proves how some royal houses made family marriage permanent. Don Carlos of Spain. He was born into the same Habsburg world that later produced Charles II. From youth, he seems to have been physically weak and unhealthy. The sources also suggest instability, both bodily and mental. Then came the famous staircase fall, a brutal accident that damaged him further. After that came headaches, fevers, strange behavior, and violent mood swings. Whether every story is reliable or not, the overall picture is disturbing. The court saw a prince whose health was deeply troubling. He became less a future king than a dangerous problem inside the palace. Eventually, his own father, Philip II, had him confined. There, isolated and deteriorating, Don Carlos declined rapidly. He died in 1568, only 23 years old. His life was an early Habsburg warning, not just bad politics, but a body and mind that never looked stable. Margaret Theresa of Spain. She is famous from court portraits, but the paintings hide her fragility. Margaret was another Habsburg child born inside the same tight family web. She looked delicate and remained physically small. Her story becomes one of reproductive strain. Dynastic marriage treated her body as a tool for heirs. Married very young, she endured repeated pregnancies and losses. Each pregnancy seems to have weakened her further. By barely 20, her body already seemed exhausted. This is a different kind of damage from Charles's jaw or Tutankhamun's limp. But it belongs to the same story. Margaret died in 1673, only 21 years old. Her portraits remain polished and regal. The life behind them was a young body worn down too soon. Ferdinand I of Austria. Ferdinand looked like an emperor trapped inside a body that did not function smoothly. He suffered serious developmental problems from childhood. He was often described as physically weak and neurologically limited. Accounts also point to seizures and poor coordination. Speech could be difficult, movement could be awkward. Basic stamina seems to have been limited too. Yet the dynasty still placed the crown on his head. Bloodline logic outran physical reality. The state continued around him while ministers handled what he could not sustain. Ferdinand did not die spectacularly young, and that matters. Longevity does not erase fragility, dependency, and dynastic narrowing. Inbreeding damage does not always create one dramatic death scene. Sometimes it creates a ruler whose body cannot support the crown. Maria I of Portugal. Her case matters because the collapse was mental as much as physical. She came from a royal environment shaped by close dynastic connections. For years, she functioned as queen. Then family deaths and pressure pushed her toward catastrophic breakdown. Reports describe deep depression, fear, religious mania, and screaming. Modern doctors debate the exact diagnosis, but the historical impression is unmistakable. Maria became gravely unwell. She was not simply sad or eccentric. Her illness consumed the public image of her rule. Not every case appears as a jaw, a limp, or infertility. Sometimes the damage seems to take hold in the mind. Maria did not die young, but her life was overshadowed by incapacity. She reminds us that hereditary damage can be hidden and internal. Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany. With Leopold, the danger was not a visible deformity. It was a lethal inherited disorder carried in royal blood. He had hemophilia, which prevents blood from clotting properly. A bruise, a fall, or internal bleeding could become life-threatening. He lived with a body that could turn ordinary injury into mortal danger. Royal rank could not protect him from that invisible weakness. His case helps explain the so-called royal disease across Europe. To the eye, Leopold could appear elegant and perfectly aristocratic, but under the skin, his blood carried a danger that never left him. In 1884, he fell, and the bleeding proved fatal. He died at only 30 years old. Leopold shows how a dynasty can look polished outside while carrying a deadly secret inside the blood itself. Alexei Romanov. Alexei was the heir to Russia and the most famous royal child with hemophilia. For him, the disorder was not abstract. It was a daily physical danger. A bruise, a bump, or a fall could fill his joints with blood, and that could leave him screaming in pain. He was constantly watched, protected, and sometimes carried. Almost any injury might become dangerous. His suffering terrified his parents. The future of the dynasty seemed trapped inside one fragile boy. That fear helped pull Rasputin into the center of the Romanov court. A blood disorder became a medical crisis and a political force. Alexei was murdered with his family in 1918, but his body had made him vulnerable long before that final night. He was not only a prince in danger from politics, he was a child in danger from his own blood. Alfonso, Prince of Asturias. With Alfonso, the story reaches the modern age. But the genetic danger is still the same. He inherited hemophilia through the royal line linked to Queen Victoria. That meant his blood could not clot properly. On the surface, he looked like a modern prince. Inside, he carried a hidden hereditary danger. For someone with hemophilia, an ordinary accident can become deadly. That is why Alfonso's death is so striking. In 1938, he was injured in a car crash. It might have been survivable for a healthier man. For Alfonso, the internal bleeding was devastating. He died at 31. Less because of the crash than because his blood could not protect him. Even in the 20th century, royal genetics could turn one injury into a death sentence. 10 royals. 10 warnings. Some were visibly deformed, some were mentally shattered, others were destroyed by blood that could not clot, or bodies that could not bear dynastic pressure. Royal blood was supposed to protect dynasties. Again and again, it damaged the people inside them instead.